Dog by Daniel Pennac, chapters 9 through 11. In the dog pound. So you got nabbed too, piped up a voice in the darkness. It took Dog a while to make out who was talking to him. You're only a pup, the voice went on. Couldn't you have given them the slip? That's precisely my point, sniffed a disapproving voice. Young dogs today haven't got a clue. Never look where they're going, and before they know it, they end up behind bars. So how come you're in here if you're so clever? Asked the first voice wearily. Special case, sniffed the second voice. They caught me while I was asleep. But they won't keep me long. First chance I get, I'm out of here. Yeah, that's what they all say, the first voice continued. It belonged to a large pile of wool lying at the back of the van. But it's getting more difficult. Where are we going? Dog finally plucked up the courage to ask the woolly one. I don't believe my ears, said Sniffy. Were you born in a barn, my friend? What have I done to be locked up with a half-wit like you? Leave him alone, growled Wally, his teeth gleaming in the half-darkness. Then he turned toward Dog. They're taking us to the dog pound. Why? Asked Dog, who also wanted to know what a dog pound was, but didn't dare ask too many questions at once. Why? Oh, please, someone pinch me. I must be dreaming. And Sniffy began whispering in Dog's ear. Municipal Bylaw of July 1 of this year, regarding the need for cleaning up our town and taking into consideration the proliferation of stray dogs threatening our tourist industry. The rounding up of the said dogs by the relevant council authorities will henceforth be carried out on a daily basis. If the owners concerned do not reclaim their pets within a period of 3 days, bang, bang. The last 2 words are my own, whispered Sniffy with a horrible grin. They don't sound official, but they mean the same thing. There was a deathly hush. The van spluttered as it edged forward. From time to time, the engine cut out, and they coasted along, braking gently. Sometimes the van stopped with a jolt, and the back door opened to reveal the shadow of a dog being hurled inside. There must be some mistake. Do you realize who you're dealing with? Shouted one of the newcomers, much to Sniffy's amusement. Sometimes the new arrivals were half asleep and didn't bother kicking up a fuss. Sometimes they just said, Hi, guys. How long? 3 days, Wooly would reply. And Sniffy would add, or else, bang, bang. But every so often the van started its engine again without the door having been thrown open, at which point there was a general hullabaloo, with Sniffy shouting louder than everyone else, Missed! What a bunch of losers! Fire them all! Call yourself dog catchers. Tortoise chasers, more like, Missed! Pathetic! Try your luck with snails, or slugs. Missed! Even Wooly joined in, and then the noise began to die down until it finally stopped altogether, because all things considered, there wasn't much to shout about. Chapter 10, Total Terror. The dog pound is Dog's worst memory. At this point in his dream, he always starts shouting out in the night. This, in turn, makes Mr. Muscle wake up with a jolt and start complaining. Dog's dreaming again. I can't put up with much more of this. Actually, Mr. Muscle's frightened. His blood runs cold when that whining sound rises from Dog's memory. So Mr. Muscle wakes Mrs. Squeak because he doesn't like feeling frightened. What? What is it? What's going on? It's Dog. He's dreaming, whispers Mr. Muscle. Again? Squeaks Mrs. Squeak. I really can't stand much more of this. As for Plum, she's sleeping so deeply she wouldn't hear a gun being fired. And Dog is shut in the kitchen, alone with his dream, alone with his memories. There was such a racket when they arrived at the dog pound, the metal hangar with its concrete floor made their voices ring. The dogs, who were already there, rushed up to the bars of their cages. The sound of the barking broke out everywhere. Take a good look. Lads, it's the new boys. Kind of you to join us. Well, fancy that if it isn't our old friend Sniffy. Got yourself picked up again. Misery guts. 3 days, 3 days. Long live the mayor. And so on, just to show they weren't frightened. But things soon went quiet, just as they had when they in the van. Because beyond their silence, and hidden under several layers of pride, lurked total terror. The same fear that Dog had experienced in the front of Black Nose's motionless body He felt it in all the hushed conversations around him. "I'm not hanging around," said one voice. "It's just a matter of a quick identity." "I'll bite anyone who touches me," growled another. "Frankly, I couldn't give a hoot. It's a dog's life, whatever happens." And the worst thing was, none of them believed a word they were saying. Some whined for hours on end. "And they talk about cleaning up the town. They've got nerve, making it out where we're the ones polluting it. What about the exhaust fumes we have to breathe in from their stinking cars? They say we've got rabies, but what about their crazy fits of road rage? The day before yesterday, I saw 2 drivers attack each other over a parking space." "Crazy. They're stark raving mad," interrupted another voice. "Last week, one actually bit me." This raised a few laughs here and there. "It's true, I swear. He was a friend of my owner's, so up I trotted, held out my paw, and ouch! Hey, that's enough. Shut up." Silence, total terror was on the prowl, and no one really wanted to talk anyway. Each dog was worried about the future. The hours went by. Those who had owners jumped up each time the main gate opened. They glued their noses to the bars. Sometimes an owner did arrive, and everyone was forced to witness the reunion. The dogs would jump up and down on the ends of leashes, and the owners kept repeating their pets' names. They looked like long-lost lovers when the owners kissed and hugged the dogs who licked them back. "Their pedigrees, of course," remarked Wooly. Dog, Wooly, and the rest of the gang from the van had all been locked up in the same cage. "What's a pedigree?" asked Dog. "It's an idea invented by humans," replied Sniffy scornfully, "and it's completely fake. For example, you might take a very fast dog like a greyhound, a very muscular dog like an Alastian, and a very hardy dog like the beagle. Mix them together, and what do you get? The Doberman. Once you've bred a Doberman, he's allowed to marry only other Dobermans. Human beings love Dobermans, but I think they're idiots. I've known quite a few in my time, and I can tell you it wasn't a Doberman who invented the shin bone. Hardly surprising when you think how much they intermarry. They have nasty dispositions, and they're so stuck up." All right, you made your point," interrupted Wooly. "I once had a friend who was a Doberman, and he was very nice, too." "Are you a pedigree?" Dog asked Wooly. Wooly managed a feeble smile. "I have every kind of pedigree in me. I'm related to any dog you care to mention. Even Sniffy here, who doesn't look a bit like me. Even you." "Don't you have an owner?" The smile vanished from Wooly's face. A long silence followed. A very long silence indeed. Finally, Wooly said, "I used to have a mistress." Silence. "And?" Silence. "I lost her." The sun was high in the sky. It was stiflingly hot under the great metal roof of the pound. There were a lot of tongues hanging out. "What do you mean you lost her?" "Just that. I went out for a walk one evening, and when I came back the next morning, she was gone. The apartment was empty. She'd moved out." "Typical," snorted Sniffy. "She probably found herself a new man. He didn't like dogs, and in a toss-up between the two of you, he won, hands down." "Perhaps," said Wooly. "But didn't you follow her smell?" asked Dog, amazed. "What good would it have done? If she didn't want me any more, what was the point?" "Quite right, not to go crawling after her," applauded Sniffy. "We dogs have our self-respect to consider." After a while, Wooly said in a thoughtful voice, "Anyway, it's my fault. I didn't train her properly." Their conversation was interrupted by something Dog would never forget, something that's made him call out every night ever since. The main gate swung open onto the setting sun. A black van reversed through the gate into the dog pound. 10 men wearing leather gloves jumped out. They opened a whole row of cages, grabbed hold of the dogs, and hurled them into the van. The director of the dog pound watched the whole operation with a blank smile on his face. The dogs were kicking with all 4 legs and barking and biting, but it was over in a flash, and nothing they did made any difference. The van took off again. The gates closed behind it. There was a deadly silence. A gust of total terror had just blown through. All the dogs were looking at the row of empty cages. They were the 3-day cages. Chapter 11, Sniffy. The next day, Dog and his friends were moved to a 2-day cage. They had another day of waiting ahead of them. In the small hours, a new supply of stray dogs had been put in their old cage. There was the same kerfluffle as the day before when they'd first arrived, and the day panned out just the same, except there was more tension. The sun grew hotter as it climbed over the corrugated iron roof until the heat became unbearable. The water in the tin trays was tepid. None of the dogs touched their food. From time to time, an owner would come to pick up a dog. But for every dog rescued, there was lots more dashed hopes. Toward 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a stray procession arrived. In front, there was a tall blonde girl who lisped loudly. Behind her, a hairy man with a beard was carrying a black machine with an eye in one end, and in third place was the pound director smiling blankly. As soon as they were in view, all dogs began to bark in unison. Journalist, journalist, yoo-hoo, over here, journalist, me. No, not him, me. What's going on, Dog asked Wooly. It's for TV. They have a slot for homeless dogs. They come here once a week and choose a dog to film for the local news to help find a new owner. And what do they do? What do they have to do to be filmed, asked Dog. Be good looking. They'll probably pick you, said Dog. You're very handsome. Thank you, said Wooly, but I'm too old. You also have to be young and not too fat. Young and not too fat, like me, for example? Do you think they'll choose me? You've got to be joking, sneered Stiffy. Have you seen your face? You're much too ugly. But I'm exactly what they're looking for. And pushing Dog out of the way, he glued himself to the cage. What happened next had to be seen to be believed. Sniffy, who was completely stuck up and never had a good word to say about anyone, who made fun of doggy-woggies and their mollycoddling owners, who just spent 2 days talking about independence and freedom and self-respect, now glued his entire body to the cage and whimpered in a voice that was soft and musical and not the slightest bit arrogant. Hey, you journalists, please will you listen? I'm a poor homeless dog whose mistress died. Don't you feel sorry for me? Couldn't you find me another home with lots of kitty-witties to play with? I'm a complete natural with children. I love them to bits. It was so convincing and so different from all the other clamorings that the blonde journalist stopped in front of the cage with tears in her eyes. Oh, he's so cute, she sobbed. Don't you think he's cute, Coco? He's to die for. And so handsome. I'm sure he has some long-haired dachshund in him. He'd make an adorable dog for a condo owner, wouldn't he? Don't you think, Coco? Coco was the hairy man with the beard. He was struggling with a very heavy camera, and the sweat was pouring off of him. He agreed. 2 hours later, once the filming was over, they brought Sniffy back. He was very pleased, and his fur was all glossy and shiny. It was absolutely fantastic. Makeup, lights, and a velvet cushion, the whole works. The only thing was they filled me with some kind of cat, an angora or something, which stank of perfume and had a ludicrous silk bow tied around its neck. I was dying to attack it. If I clap eyes on that cat when I get out. There was a hush. Everyone found his behavior embarrassing, but Sniffy didn't seem to notice. He just babbled on. Couldn't be easier, really. First thing tomorrow, my owners-to-be will come for me. There'll be at least 50, I imagine, and I'll just have to choose between them. The kids are the only snag. I can't stand the brats. They really get on my nerves. Not that it matters much. As soon as my new owners turn their backs, I'll be off again. Freedom and respect. You'll see. He talked and talked. Nobody listened. The sun was setting. They tried not to look in the direction of the main gate, which was about to open.